Hello and welcome to Living with Intention Live. For those who do not know me, I am April Wyatt, and I bring together people to bring more an impact about wellness. And really, today is about domestic violence, and it's about how we hold that in ourselves, in the communities, and in businesses, that silence. And that really impacts everyone in the process. So that silence exists because we don't feel safe. We don't feel safe to speak. We don't feel safe to express. We don't feel safe to even help or reach out because of the false beliefs that we have about it. There's a lot of stigma around it. And when that silence is held for too long, it doesn't disappear. And for me as a somatic performance coach, it shows up in, of course, our minds, right? In our bodies. It affects our relationships and how people move through their lives and workspace. So this live is creating space to talk about this reality that's happening, this silence, but we're doing it in a grounded and responsible way, right? This is a sensitive topic. So this requires, right, the steadiness to hold this space and that care for others and offering support. We want people to feel empowered through this conversation. It's just not throwing, I'm picking up Mike Asherbrand or what he would say, like Jello at the wall and hoping it sticks. No, we want this to be sustainable. We want to provide information and resources so that way we can break this cycle. And this is about staying present, about not walking away and thinking it's just going to go away. And so this understanding fits into the foundation of what I do, whether through its conversations like this on live shows or the spaces I hold in personal one-on-one sessions or in retreats, such as my Bali retreats that's coming up. And that intention is to create those environments where people feel supported, right? Feel safe enough to speak, to breathe, to move, to release those traumas that are held in the body and give our voices more power to be able to speak and be heard and seen. That's the sense of safety and support so that we can have more clarity in our lives. And it's so important in this day and age. And so with this Bali retreat that I'm hosting, it's October 10th through the 17th. And again, we come together to hold a safe space so that way people can release tensions. They can really discover more about themselves in the process while being witnessed by other amazing people, because that's where healing begins. When other caring, compassionate people are showing up and supporting us. So not only are we having breath work, meditations, movement, dance, we have fun. We go out into the community and we actually explore the Balinese culture. So this image was taken at a temple that's 3000 BCE, and Balinese have been pilgrimaging there for centuries. And we receive a water purification ceremony at sunrise from this natural spring that empties out into the ocean. And the priest douses us with this beautiful, pure water, and then we float in the ocean. Who does not want to float in the ocean in Bali? I don't know, but that's where I'm going to be October 10th through the 17th. And if that feels like something that you would like to explore with me, you can just snap that QR code in the upper right-hand corner to my website or the lower QR code in the corner of the image that takes you directly to the Bali retreat. And this is what I love to do, is to create that safe space for others and build that community of awareness. And speaking of community of awareness, this is how I met Agape, A. Garcia, through the Hounds of Business with Mike Asherbranner. You know, having a community of support really plays a role as well. And because it's a heart-centered community where we have real conversations that are welcomed, and we share personal experiences, and we understand that this is a safe space, right? Where people are willing to connect and co-create and also amplify other people's messages, such as domestic violence and helping other people get noticed, get seen, have their value shown. And this is what real authentic leadership's about. So I want to acknowledge Mike Asherbranner for creating the Hounds of Business community, and that allows, you know, conversations like this to happen, because, you know, that support extends beyond the individual and really into the community and systems that are around us, right? The environments. So today I am joined by Kat and Agape, and I'm so excited. It sounds kind of strange to say I'm excited to talk about domestic violence, but it's more about I'm excited for the empowerment, for the resources, for the shares that they're going to tell us today to help inspire others, right? To break that silence, because that's where the ripples begin. So without further ado, I'm inviting up Agape and Kat to the show. Thank you so much for being here, friends. You're both on mute, just to let you know before you start talking. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for inviting us. Definitely.
Yeah, it's so good to have you both here, because as soon as I thought about this, it was like I knew that I had to have you both on the show because of the work you do, because of your own passions, kindness. And if you could just introduce yourselves, because there's some people here that might not know who you are and what you're doing in the community. So, Kat, would you mind stepping up first and introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name is Kat Polsinelli. I am the founder and creator of The Lotus Effect. I am a speaker on domestic violence and also an active advocate as well. And I run a podcast called Real Chat with Kat. The whole premise is to create support, connection, and understanding so we can build community where we actually start with curiosity and lead with that and let go of the judgment.
Communities. That's great. And it's more than that, though. What is your passion? I'm just going to let you know. I want to hear your passion, Kat. What is
passion? My passion is to share with absolutely everyone as much as I can around domestic violence, not only for them to understand what abuse means, but to understand the levels of abuse and really understand that there's a lot more that's behind the scenes than what we tend to think about. You talked about having this space where people kind of have their own stigmas. And one of the stigmas I had was that abuse was very physical. So if you weren't being bruised and beaten, then it wasn't abuse. And because of the verbal and emotional and psychological abuse that I took, I want people to understand what that means, especially when it comes to our law enforcement and with university students that are going to be going into social work, psychology, criminal justice, those spaces, so that we can create more of an open curiosity and get rid of that judgment, because they're going to get the whole story instead of those 2 minutes during that conversation.
Yes, and I can't wait for you to unpack exactly how you go in and highlight that in communities, because you're doing real phenomenal work. You really are, Kat. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate that. And Agape.
Yes, thank you, Agape. I am the founder of Confronting Domestic Violence. Our mission is to provide real time resources to real time victims and offer relocation assistance when survivors have a safe place to go and not the means to get there. I am really focusing on SB 553 at the moment. That is a Senate bill that passed in the state of California. It is a workplace violence prevention plan, and it is required for organizations that there are plenty of stipulations, but it is a mandate for many organizations throughout the state. And I am really happy that the state is seeing this as a significant issue, and they're putting, laws in place that are being enforced to help survivors that are showing up to the workplace.
Mm. Yeah, it's just incredible what you both are doing. And this is really, as Kat, you said about the stigmas, right? The stigmas that are surrounded by domestic violence, it, and as the title is, right, the silence, right, that stigmas often live quietly within communities, so from what you both seen, how do you think the stigmas shape whether people speak up or get involved or they stay silent?
That's a question to unpack.
Yeah, it is.
I think that, I'll come from personal experience first, and kind of bring this in because I know this is going to resonate with a lot of people. I grew up in a really great household. My family is still together. I was the oldest of three girls. And so we weren't really exposed to anything like that. And one of the stigmas or the things that was in my brain was, if somebody was in that situation, then they probably saw it as a child. They've already been in it. And so it's just a repetitive pattern, but there's no way that that's going to happen to me. Lo and behold, at the age of 18, that's what I found myself in for 10 years. So that is a huge stigma of a lot of people not understanding that it comes in all shapes and sizes, and it doesn't matter your background. Domestic violence can affect you. You can be swooned into it. Like, it's a part of everything from every person's angle. The other thing, like we talked about earlier, is, for me, abuse always was identified as, and I think it still is very much so today, as the bruises, the person that's in the hospital, the things that you can physically see. But what we don't talk about, and I think one of the reasons why some people do not come forward, myself included for a long time, is because when you don't have those physical bruises, when you can't show physical evidence, how do we expect people to believe us? How do we expect to be able to get away from this person? I always use an analogy when I'm speaking with law enforcement, and I say, after even the first incident that happened, which we were 3.5 years into our relationship, I was choked 6 months pregnant on my bed. And when I got up, there were no bruises or anything. And so it was, what do I tell them? Well, I can tell them, but there's not going to be bruises. So what do I say? He's being mean to me. Is anyone going to actually listen? And there's a huge stigma that comes with that. And I think that's a lot of the reasons why we tend to play small or we keep it to ourselves, because there isn't a lot of belief. There's more judgment. There's more questions than actually listening to someone trying to tell their story, especially if we don't have the physical aspects to prove it.
Yes. And I really do appreciate you sharing your story, Kat, that being very vulnerable and being part of this is your passion. This is why you're coming forward and working with law enforcement. And it just, as you said, because I didn't have the bruises, because it didn't look ugly and messy, is it just him being mean to me and second guessing, right? Belittling ourselves, keeping ourselves small in that. And that is a stigma for sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. And Agape, the stigmas that you have faced or are aware of with the work that you do, how is that keeping people silent?
Yeah, I'm almost choked up here. I mean, I had no idea of Kat's experience, and I want to kind of reflect on that for a moment because I have a similar experience of being 8 months pregnant and surviving that double attempted homicide. Very similar of being, pinned down to the floor and being choked out. And, when you don't have family, when you don't have friends, when you're in a space all by yourself, which is my personal story, the last thing you're going to do is, go to work and share that, because for some of us, work is the only place that is your area that you can depend on, the place you depend on, the people that you depend on. And that stigma, you're in so much fear that you're not going to share that outside because work may be all that you have to help you get through the situation. And, where I come from, what happens at home is only that home business. You don't really share what's going on. And for me, I had to navigate on my own through all of that. And when I say on my own, like calling 1-800 numbers until I could find outside help from, public assistance. And so the stigma is definitely there. And to Kat's point, it doesn't matter, age, color, background, religion. It definitely happens to all of us. And I know people that have written books that, shattered without a mark for, to support what she's saying, that narcissistic abuse, the financial abuse, the verbal abuse, the emotional abuse, those sometimes are a lot deeper scars and bruises than the actual ones that you can see.
Mm-hmm. And to have two courageous women such as yourself, and to come forward and to give a voice for those who have not found theirs yet. Haven't found theirs yet. And I really appreciate Whitney for chiming in. She says, sharing this out is so important for others to hear. Yes, Whitney, thank you so much for being here and listening, and maybe even sharing this with others too on your feed, as this is the ripple effect. You can be that voice for someone else, and maybe even bringing in awareness and insight to this, because it's so needed right now. Our society is more isolated than more so than ever before. And it's technology, is a wonderful thing, yet it's very isolating too. So if we can just break that cycle and understand, wow, I'm not imagining this is happening, and what can I do to find my voice to receive the support, and or even with other people in our lives too, that we might be witnessing some tail signs of abuse, and having those conversations with others. So I want to also shout out to Boz for being here. Thank you so much, Boz. He's an amazing coach, working with women. And then we have Leanne. It's so good to see you here. It's been a bit since I've seen you, Leanne. So thank you for your support too, for being here. And also the silence I just want to bring forward of my experience with the silence of domestic violence. And it was when I was living in Japan. I lived in a tower on base. It was on base. Excuse me. And there's a lot of different people living in there, different ethnicities, different, cultural backgrounds. The Navy is a melting pot. And that's what I loved about that too. Although until I was woken up in the early morning hour of the neighbor who I barely knew, and hearing the sounds, right? Hearing the voices, hearing all of that. And I was torn from my sleep. And that is also like secondhand trauma, that we receive. That still echoes in my body. It really does. And so then immediately, we're talking about breaking the silence, right? I was by myself. My husband was deployed. So I felt threatened, even though I wasn't receiving what she was. And right away, I called the MPs, of course. But I even second guessed myself. Should I do this? Should I make this call? What's going to happen? Like just brief, right? Real quick went through my mind. And then I said, no, this is something that I need to do for her. She does not have the capacity to do this for herself. And so I did make that call, and I'm so grateful that I did. But this is all about breaking that silence and being there for other people in different ways. So you both have different ways that you work with that. So whether it's us individually, seeing that in our community, our neighbors, our friends and family, but you both work on a broader perspective, which I absolutely appreciate. And there's so much depth to it that you are creating more waves, and you both need that extra oomph, right, to really get your message out there and what you're doing in community. So Agape, can you share how you're working with the California law with companies with I forgot what it's called, but I'm sure you'll tell us.
That's okay. Yes. For short, it's SB 553 because the title of that is Workplace Violence Prevention Plan. And it takes you through a very deep dive. They have 4 different types that they state as workplace violence. It could be, between worker and worker, client or customer coming into the workplace, also intimate partner violence, and then just a random act of violence. Those are the 4 different types. And what's interesting is that, back to the domestic violence part, right? Domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence, that spillover at work happens all the time. I mean, if we just look at the statistics, right? 1 out of 3 women, 1 out of 4 men. So if you have 100 employees, 30 people are going through something. How it shows up at work is covert, but it does. And that is where I come in and talk with or different organizations that qualify, that meet the mandates, and ask very simple questions up front. What is your access control policy? What is your reporting policy? What is your response policy? If these things are already not in place, or if they are, for lack of better terms, breached, then this SB 553 bill really closes in those gaps. What I find as the important part of that is that this mandate is requiring organizations to actually help the survivor. What that looks like is up to the corporation. However, there are things in place that are required to at least document it properly, so that if something does happen, they can submit the information to back up that survivor, to show that there is merit behind, what was said, what was shared, the investigations that they have conducted, and what their response was to that in order to help prevent it. It's unfortunate that when somebody leaves work and they go back home, then you don't know what's going on. You can't help beyond what's happening at the workplace. It really does end up on the individual as it relates to how far do they want to go and how deep do they want to actually seek that help. My whole thing is, you may not know who you are because you're confused or you're emotionally distraught based on what's going on, but you know who you're not. And once you identify who you're not, you can start creating those boundaries and seeking the help that you need. And that goes back to the stigma, right? It's very like a closed mouth is not going to get fed. So please, the moment that you share, and I'm encouraging listeners, if you know of someone or you yourself are experiencing a form of domestic violence, which there's multiple forms, say something, because more than likely the person that you're sharing it with has experience as well and can help you beyond what you think that they can. And it should not be a stigma anymore. And I'm hoping that Senate Bill 553 is helping push that as well, now that employers are mandated to assist.
That I really appreciate you reframing it as, what you're not, right? Giving them some traction, giving them a different perspective of how they see themselves in the situation. Because when we're in that space, so in the weeds of it, we can't even see ourselves in that space, as you said, Agape. And I really appreciate you framing it that way. It's so important. Yeah. And so I have one more question, though, for you, Agape, since we're talking about this mandate and employers. Um, how can business leaders, such as HR managers, uh, what message do you have to say to them about how can they be an advocate for domestic violence, to helping their employees? How can they have those conversations, because it's so sensitive, right? How does that start?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because SB 553 does fall under the Labor Code 6401.7 and 9, which is on HR. So this is all HR. So for HR people who are dealing with individuals that are coming to them and sharing their situation, the first thing is to listen. Believe everything that's being said, document what is being shared, offer resources. If you don't know where to find resources, you can find multiple resources on confrontingdomesticviolence.org under the resource tab. There's plenty there. And just make sure that you follow up. The other side of this, and I haven't gone too public with this, that's why you see my little hesitation here, but I'm really looking at trying to offset and balance out this mandate, meaning that if we're reporting, if reporting domestic violence to the workplace is happening, resources should be available there as well, just like it is for alcohol, porn addicts, gamblers, through EAP programs. So I'm currently working with another individual across the states, and we're applying to create this opportunity and show that this is a beautiful way to offset this reporting with having resources available. Then this way, the company can guide them to the trained advocates, to the trained organizations, to the people that know how to handle these types of situations, to the organizations that have multi collaborations with multiple agencies, so that no matter what the situation is, if they themselves cannot help them, then another organization that they are tied to can provide the assistance that they're seeking.
It's so needed to have that network, to have those organizations, to get those resources, to get the support and help for those individuals. And also, I just want to say again, domestic violence is men and women.
That's right.
And we need to remember that.
Sorry, I wanted to mention one more thing with domestic violence coming to the workplace. The regular individual, regardless what your title is, they are the first responders waiting for emergency responders to show up, right? So really knowing what to do and how to handle the situation to mitigate and prevent is so crucial.
Exactly. And that's perfect segue, because that's who Kat works with, is the first responders. And so Kat, what do you have to contribute to this about working with first responders, and how to, I'm not saying train them, but you're giving them that different perspective, right? Of how to look at things differently, how to listen, how to key into the underlining silence that's so heavy, right? As they arrive on the scene.
Absolutely. And I think that there's also kind of a stigma when it comes to our law enforcement and things as well, because they either, one, expect them to save us from everything, or two, they're like, well, they're numb to everything, so they're never going to do what we need them to do. And that stigma plays along with victims as well. It's one of the reasons why I had a really hard time coming forward. I wasn't sure if anybody was going to listen to me, if they were going to believe me. There's all these things that are always told in society, and I'm here to debunk that. The amount of officers that I have spoken with that have sat down with me and listened to the in-depths of what I have been through, because I don't just teach, I share the in-depths of my story. I want to bridge the gap from what they hear when they meet someone to understanding what happened behind those scenes. Because unfortunately, across the United States, 15 to 55% of police calls are domestic violence related. So they are seeing this on a regular basis. And yes, they do have other calls and things they always have to get to, but it's because they don't understand what is going behind the scenes. They are getting 2%, if that, of a story if someone is able to regurgitate it while in a survival mode and then trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with it, right? So by having these kinds of conversations, we open up the door for them to really be able to see what is happening behind the scenes. And then not only that, but what happens afterwards? What happens when someone does decide to leave? Why do they not go and press the charges? Why do they go to press the charges and then go back to that person? Mine involves stalking afterward. And so I talk intimately about that as well. Again, to give a full 360 view, which is what officers are lacking. And if I can be that voice for them to hear something and make a connection, then I know that the next time they go to a call where they're like, here we go again, I've been to this person's house 3 times, I'm going to take the report, they're going to stop and be like, oh my gosh, I remember her saying this is what might happen. I remember her saying this is why they might not be able to give me the story and why it's in broken pieces. So that's what I want to do, is bridge that gap so that when people do handle these delicate situations, they have more knowledge on why someone is doing things the way that they are.
Exactly. And I truly believe it's because of the trauma, not just being silent to keep themselves safe, to protect themselves, but also cognitively. You know, when you are in fight, flight, you are survival mode for your life. Your mind is not going to function correctly. Things are going to be scattered. And you can't even conceptualize what just happened.
Absolutely. You know, and that even happened when I had my call. When I finally made the call, which actually was on behalf of a patient that I was doing therapy on that day, I still had a really hard time of like reliving the scenario and trying to tell all of the things. Now, I was very blessed that I had an amazing advocate at our domestic violence center who was able to really ask questions and walk me through and provide this really safe environment. But yes, it is very important to understand that when you're in a survival space, all other functions are shut down. Logic is the first thing to go. And the only thing that your brain knows is how do we make sure we continue breathing? And so being able to give a full story is going to come in bits and pieces, or you might tell the beginning, but then you might tell the end, but then you kind of tell the middle. And so it's very important to know how to gather that information and then ask questions to help fill in the gaps and give that person a little bit of breathing room as well as they try to come down from what just happened. And a lot of times, bombarding them with question after question after question ends up shutting them down versus allowing them space to be able to continue to speak. And so that's one of the things that we talk about. And it's one of the reasons why even after the talk, we host a 45-minute open Q&A to allow those officers and psychology students to ask anything that they can think of, because that's what's going to stick with them. Not something they read in a book. What they are able to hear from someone so they can understand it in their perspective is going to make a difference in the future.
Yes. And it's so important to understand that this is a human, right? This is a person. And as you said, that when an outsider watches or observes this repetitive behavior happening and how this person is just in survival mode, you know, just to make it through the day. And then what do both of you suggest to do when somebody wants to help them and they say, oh no, you're just going to make it worse? How do we support that person or find a way to give them a lifeline? Is it just listening? Is it just being there for them? What does that look like? Because I've been in those situations too, where I've noticed my women friends, something happening, and that is not right. And I'm very headstrong, and I was ready to march over and just punch the guy. Seriously. And they're like, "No, April, you're just going to make it worse." And then I felt like my voice was silenced because I wanted to stand up for her. I wanted to be that person for her that her partner couldn't be. So I'm curious, as you're sharing all this is just what's coming up for me. I'm curious if anybody else that's listening in, please put some comments in there and let us know. But what would you say to that individual?
I love this question. And funny enough, this is actually a question I get very often with law enforcement, which is not how you would think that they respond. But again, this is why I say there's a stigma out there that is not true, because they really do genuinely want to understand. In my personal opinion, this is a very touchy space to be, because yes, there is a very good possibility that you are trying to be the hero, the person to save them, the person to help them, right? In the best way possible. And you can make the situation very worse on them, because if they go home with it and decide not to move forward, there's things that happen behind that closed doors that just made it worse, because they're going to get blamed for everything that you just tried to do. If you are having a conversation with someone like this and they are giving you the information, but they are not ready to make the leap on their own, it is more of a conversation in a space of listening. And because I'm just like you, April, and I have to be very mindful of this even to this day. When I hear couples argue and stuff like that, I can pick things out.
Yes.
And I have to remember that I can't just march over and interject myself. But what I can do is subtle signs, right? I hear you. Do you need to talk? There are things that you can do. And being a listening ear is one of the best. Then it's actually taking a completely different direction. So instead of our usual headstrong, that's not right, they shouldn't be treating you like that, in that moment, even though you don't mean to, you are speaking similar to the person they are with. So what's happening is instead of them hearing what you are saying and saying, oh, they're coming from a loving space, immediately their subconscious wants to shut down, because it is in the same tone as the person that they're dealing with, even though that's not what we mean. So very soft, very calm. I'm so sorry. Can you tell me more? Is that normal? Do you feel like you deserve that? What is going on? Ask the questions to give them space to validate themselves, because that is one thing that survivors are missing, is we have not been able to validate ourselves in a very long time. We have someone that might be telling us how we look, how we should dress, what we should do, and how we should feel. And so when someone comes in, even with that loving space of this is wrong, you're coming at them in something they're similar to, and it's going to be hard for them to continue to speak up. So offering grace, moments of silence, give them the ways to be able to stand up, and then providing resources. I don't agree with this. I know that you have to make this in your own time. Here are some things I think you should be aware of. Here's what a narcissist is. Here's what it looks like if somebody's through abuse. This is what it looks like if there's financial issues. There are things out there that you can give that's informational, which ends up actually empowering that individual. And when that individual is empowered, it's going to be a lot easier for them to want to make that move and then reach out and say, hey, I need help because I can't do this anymore.
Yes, and that's perfectly said. Thank you, Kat, for reframing that for me personally, and also for everyone else listening. Just being very mindful and planting seeds. Giving them the resources, letting them know that we're here, and asking those questions is so important. Agape, do you have anything to contribute? I saw you kind of nodding about that. What are your thoughts about this before we move on?
Yes, quite a bit actually. And I failed to say this earlier and I apologize, but January is Stalking Awareness Month. Okay. So we are talking during a month of, DV. And, to what Kat was saying earlier about these repetitive calls. Oh, this is the third time they're calling. Oh, this is the fourth time they're calling. Statistics does show that it takes up to 7 times for a survivor to actually leave and not go back. And, that it's that repeat of going back is most of the time fear and finances. They fear the individual because they feel that they're under their control, and then the financial aspect of it. Can they leave? Can whether it's the financial abuse that's taking place in it, or just the insecurity and the self-doubt that is basically impounded in them to not believe in themselves. And as a provider, through confronting domestic violence, for me, it's all about preventing. How can I help prevent that cycle of return? Hence that multi-agency collaboration that we have established. And as it relates to intercepting or interjecting, I'm very much so like you guys as well. Like, oh, heck no, that is not right. And da-da-da. But, you're putting yourself at a risk in doing that. And also the way that I try to make sure that I let the individual know whether they're ready or not is that there's an open-ended invitation always available to you. I will always invite you in whenever you're ready, because I do believe that, like a diabetic, like any sort of, addict to anything, you cannot help someone until they are ready to be helped. You cannot force that, no matter how much or how deep of a loving space you're coming from. It cannot be forced. So as long as that individual knows, hey, I'm here when you're ready, it does resonate. It does stay in the back of their mind. I do have a lifeline. I know when I'm ready, I can make that call. When I'm ready, I can make that call. And, as a provider, that's how I feel the best approach is. I can only help those that are ready to be helped. So when that phone rings, or when that email comes in, or that notification comes in, I know that it's because they made that first step.
Yes. And I'm so grateful that you both are doing the work, that you are there, basically on the front lines, and to support those that have experienced that, and to help plant those seeds of awareness, so that way people know what to look for. They know how to approach, in that space, and whether it's at work or at home, for personal and professional areas, it's so important. Uh, it shouldn't matter whether it's happening in the home or at the workplace too. And just as we say domestic violence, well, wouldn't you say, this popped into my mind, I'm just going to throw it out there, like bullying at work. That's a type of, could be violence, right? That's ensues trauma and things of that nature. So that's why I so appreciate you, Agape, being here and bringing forward about how HR people can, connect and get to those resources for their employees, and bring forward different ways to approach those people in their community. And so both of your work really reaches beyond that individual person, and it's expanding into the workplaces, into the organizations. So where do you see, opportunities for prevention and protection, and the recovery also? We want to empower people too, as they, we walk them kind of through different scenarios and what to look for and everything, but the recovery, the empowerment. So what's the greatest opportunity for prevention there, and protection, and that recovery, the empowerment, for the survivors?
In the workplace specifically, human behaviors. If you have training on human behaviors, and if you are a supervisor, manager, you know your people, right? So if it's summertime and they're coming in with turtlenecks and all covered up, that might be something. Also, if they're super early, staying super late, that was me. It's because work was safer than home, not because I just loved my job. Maybe that's what they thought, but that's not what it really was. And that could be a sign as well. Same thing for, consistent tardiness, absenteeism, things of that nature. Again, because of the stigma, we're not verbalizing it, but our actions can show that. And that can be a segue into opening up that door and saying, hey, I noticed that there's been a significant change in productivity or absenteeism. Is there something that, we need to talk about? And open up that door, make it that safe place, right? Because if you have the information up front, then that internal business continuity and communication can take place to help with that prevention plan, right? So the prevention plan, going back to what I said earlier, let's just talk about access control. Who has hard keys? Who can bypass the badge reader? Do you have a tailgating or piggybacking policy? Is somebody at the front lobby who is the one person in charge of letting people in and out, have they been made aware of, this individual and their potential abuser showing up to the workplace? It really is all about understanding what is happening and understanding what would increase the risk versus decrease the risk. Obviously, sharing information may not be the best thing to do, and it may be the right thing to do. So there is that, what I call the sticky situation, right? The best thing may not be the right thing, but the right thing may be the best thing. So it kind of is all dependent upon the situation, circumstances, and the people involved. Now, how to recover? Recovery is very difficult because of what you mentioned earlier. You can have that vicarious trauma, that, inherited trauma. If you were just a witness to somebody being injured or brutally, beaten, especially at the workplace, that here comes the trauma support that's going to be required, the counseling, the therapy, the things of that nature, to make sure that people feel safe coming back to work, because it can then have a PTSD effect to everyone that was there, whether they saw it like you, whether they heard it, or if they were, innocent bystander to it.
Mm.
So it just all goes back. It's circumstantial. Every situation is different. Every person is different. So
Yes.
it's something that, stakeholders need to come together and discuss. My big thing is, if you have physical security, whether it's in-house or third party, they should always be intertwined with HR, because security is 24/7. HR is not. And security may have a lot more information than HR does, and vice versa. And a lot of times, those two entities that are exposed to human behaviors and in people reporting situations or concerns, oftentimes they're not in communication, human resources and security. So that is a huge area that I focus on, as well as it relates to the prevention, mitigation, and response.
That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Garcia. Yes, and Kat, I am more curious about the recovery and the empowerment for the victims. What how can people instill that? What would that look like?
I think that I agree with Agape that it's different for every situation, right? It depends on where you are at, where you feel like you can go, what you may be going on in your life. When I got out of my situation, I had two boys that were 10 and 7. I didn't make time. I'm not going to say I didn't have time, but I didn't make time to make sure that I was good, because I figured I got out of it, so we're cool. I'm going to continue working my 50, 60-hour week job, take care of my kids. They're number one. And that's the end of it. So I didn't actually seek help until 5 years later, which can be a detriment, one, to yourself, but especially if you have kids, because all that stress, all that trauma, all those things that you're reliving on your own, you're inevitably giving that to your kids. The way that you act around them, your high stress levels, you're jumping them more, and it's not their issue. And so it becomes very complex. I would say that the biggest thing is you need to reach out to resources, whether that is your local domestic violence center who might have counseling there, who might be able to find counseling for you or have connections, different nonprofit organizations that have connections as well. The biggest thing that I can say when it comes to recovery is understanding that it is not linear. So you're not going to start from one end and then within a couple of years, you're like, I'm healed, I'm good, we are awesome, I can move on with my life. That is not how it works. It is like a crazy roller coaster that goes up, down, sideways, backwards, and forwards. Like that is that space. And I still live into that 11 years later. You know, I'm able to maintain and understand when those things come up and what it is coming from. And it still comes up. Things still hit you in certain situations, and you have to be able to retrain yourself to be okay with that. And that comes with a lot of grace and a lot of love and understanding for yourself, which unfortunately, when we're coming out of those situations, none of that is apparent to us.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt and shame are the two number one items that we sit with. We are so worried what other people will think of us. We are so worried about what our family might see, what our office might see, what our children might see if we break down, that we have to be okay with understanding that like this is human life and no one on this planet is getting out without some form of something happening that they need to work themselves through. And I think that healing from that and empowering from that comes from other individuals also being able to work on themselves. Because when you create that within yourself, you give space to then allow other people to go through that as well. I've talked with multiple people that have said, I will never share my story out loud, but they will share it with me and say, I don't know why I'm sharing this. Because I've created that space. I've created that neutrality. I've created that I don't judge you, because everybody goes through things kind of feeling, and people emulate that when we are in that space. So it's taking care of yourself, but it's also in regards to those that are dealing with it need to make sure they're taking care of themselves as well. I talk to law enforcement about this all the time. You are human first before you wear that badge. And if you are not taking care of yourself, that ripple effect goes out across the board. And that is in law enforcement, in people that deal with trauma, in psychology, social work, in you as an individual and how you deal with your family, your children, your job. All of that ripples if you don't start within.
Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer in that. Wow. Such great information, and it just who you are and everything that you've been through and still continuing. As you said, you're still, after these 11 years, right? Still processing, still showing up, still recognizing, I call them the echoes within. And so I so appreciate you being here, Kat. And for those who want to reach out to you, that maybe have some questions, or want to invite you to be a speaker, because you are phenomenal. How would you like them to connect with you? I do have your LinkedIn and they're kind of run together here. Sorry about that. LinkedIn and and your lotuseffect.com. Yes.
Yes. So LinkedIn is a really great way. So you can always DM me in there. You can also check out the website as well. There is a contact page on there where you can reach out to me directly. Everything comes directly to my email, so we can have a conversation to see what best suits you. There's also other conversations that I expand upon with domestic violence, depending on the search situation, the individuals, or the group that we're speaking with as well. But definitely those are going to be the two main spaces to check out to be able to contact.
Okay. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being here with us today, and knowing that you are there, and not just for individuals, but in the first responders, in guiding them, in giving them a different way, a different perspective, a different view of how to connect, how to support those people that they're serving, and making it more personable, more authentic, in a concise way, because they can't sit down, right, and do all the things, but you're giving them actually a more capacity to see things in a different light. So that way they feel that they are making a difference too, because I'm sure first responders walk away just feeling defeated if they're not able to help them, if they're not able to remove that person, if they don't want to be removed. And yet you're telling them why, and kind of lightening the load, the pressure that we put on ourselves as people who truly care and want to support these people. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much, Kat, for being here. And Agape, how would you like people to connect with you?
Actually, the very same way, LinkedIn and also our website. And I do want to share that, each one of us today are living proof of the journey of post-traumatic growth, something that isn't talked about enough. And I love talking about it. And I didn't do that at all, but I am now. And I think it's great for the finale that, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is another side of life.
Yes, I wanted to touch upon that. It's so important to empower people, to let them know there is, the light at the end of the tunnel. There is more to them than what they're seeing and experiencing right now. Just as a seed is planted in the earth, it's dark, and it does take that drive to emerge and to come up. And that starts with our voice. That starts with breaking that silence so that those ripples can begin and we can be seen and received by others. It's very important. Well, thank you very much for being here today. We really appreciate you. Please, anyone who has any more questions or wants to know more about everything that both Kat and Agape are doing, reach out to them, connect with them, because that's what they're here for. Whether it's for your own purpose, whether it's for a friend or even your own organization. Even though you are in California, Agape, I'm sure that you can kind of point other corporations and HR people in the right direction in other states, maybe. So that way they can keep this ripple going for healing and empowerment for their employees and individuals.
Definitely. There's 8 states trailing behind us as we speak.
Oh, that's amazing. So amazing. So thank you, Kat. Thank you, Agape, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, whether it was live or post watching. We really appreciate you. And thank you again. I appreciate everyone who is courageous enough to break that silence and become that ripple effect for others. Be well. Supposed to be ended. This is the after party. I don't know what's happening here.
And for some reason, because
ending?
The show is ending?
I said it. Does it show on your end that it's ended?
No, it's still showing live.
I'm still live.
We're still live. Welcome to the after party, right? This is where real conversations happen. Are we live or is it Memorex? So I hit end stream and it's still showing. So, hey, we're going to play it again, Sam.